joined by Ari Temkin. Ari, thanks for being patient, coming on a little bit later than normal. Good to see you, my friend. Iowa State, BYU. You have Arizona State, what they're doing. Kansas State goes to Boulder in another really nice game. And then there's Tech, who's kind of just right there. This is going to be fun. This is going to be just all hell bent for election, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you have to start with maybe the biggest surprises in this conference, which is obviously Arizona State and BYU. Those are two teams that most people expected to finish towards the bottom of the conference. Certainly Arizona State was a team I thought would be, one of the worst teams, if not the worst team in the Big 12. And now you look, and Utah, Oklahoma State, and Kansas are three teams that many expected to be towards the top of the conference that, we're going to have to reevaluate how we feel about that. Certainly Kansas and Oklahoma State with their winless start to conference play, and Utah, because, with the way that Cam Rising played, I know he's injured and probably going to miss the rest of the year, but regardless of that outcome, it was pretty obvious based on watching the game that the future was for Isaac Wilson. So, we are starting to get, I think, some tiers, a little bit of hierarchy here, which is good, overall. And I think that's what Smokey is surprising about this is, that we have these tiers and that who these teams are at the top. I mean, when Arizona State's probably a top 5 team in the conference, when BYU is definitely a top 5 team in the conference, that's a huge shock thing to the system. And so that's probably why we look at this conference the way we are after, 7 games.
Ari, if I told you I've got a 25-year-old quarterback for you, would you say yes or no?
I mean, we did talk about this last week, did we not, Paul?
Yeah. It's not working out well. My
no,
theory
you're
holds.
right. And again, I mean, there's a reason that these guys are still at this level. There's a reason for it. More times than not, they've gone on and either gone to be insurance brokers or real estate agents, or they've gone on to the National Football League, or at least tried to play in the NFL. And so, yeah, I mean, right now, especially in this conference, the returns are not great. There's probably a balance there, a middle ground. You obviously don't want the completely inexperienced quarterback, and you don't want the 25 to 26-year-old quarterback, but there's probably a balance there in the middle where you get a guy like Sorsby maybe, or a Jake Retzloff that's, experienced but not too experienced to kind of show you their potential. With Rising, though, it's shocking considering – I wouldn't say shocking, because he hasn't played very much in the last 2 years anyways, but it's surprising given that, like, when he was healthy early in this year, they looked like a team that should win the Big 12 and be everything that we expected. But, it got to a point almost like at the end of Tony Romo's career where it's like any hit he takes is going to have him out for weeks on end. It's not a matter of when he can come back. It's more of as soon as he comes back, he gets hurt again because, it's a young man's game and you just can't take the hits.
Yeah, I mean, to come back and then have another injury, it's just like, man, what are we even doing here? That was brutal.
Too.
Yeah, that was brutal to watch him trying to perform through that. Iowa State, West Virginia, a tale of two teams going in different directions here. A very entertaining game. Iowa State sitting really pretty, maybe the best team they've ever had. We'll see how they finish. And on the other end, Neil Brown's back on that hot seat in Morgantown, Ari. I feel like that's pretty strong coming out of this weekend, but that's just kind of the reaction I've seen from West Virginia fans at least, and we know how that can just be, just fandom, but how are you feeling about both those squads leaving Morgantown this weekend?
Yeah, and I mean, I get it, but I mean, they have 3 losses, and those 3 losses are to teams that are combined 18-0 right now. Yeah. I mean, like, brutal schedule. They lost to 6-0 Pitt, 6-0 Penn State, now 6-0 Iowa State. So, I mean, again, tough schedule. They still just have 1 loss in conference play, obviously with Kansas State coming to town, huge week for them to kind of stay in this race. But I mean, I get it. I get it. This is a disappointing game and a disappointing loss because, they really got, beaten pretty badly. And Iowa State, like, you can't say enough about John Haycock. I mean, they're down to their 3rd stringers at linebacker, 3rd and 4th stringers at safety. And yet they're still doing this. I mean, they're still dominating on defense. It's really incredible. Coming into this game, I thought West Virginia would win because, well, they were home, but because, on the ground, Iowa State was giving up a ton of yardage. Jaheim White, who's averaging in his career over 5 yards a carry, was less than 4 yards a carry in this game. I mean, it's unbelievable what John Haycock is able to do. I mean, just look at where they finish scoring defense in the Big 12 every year. It's incredible. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Every year they're top 3 in scoring, and they're losing players. They're graduating players. They're losing guys in the to the draft. They're losing guys to to injuries, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They just get new guys out there that are able to do what the other guys were able to do. They've got Cooper Ebel, a sophomore who's been phenomenal for them. Bo Goodwin stepped in as a true freshman, played really well against West Virginia. So, I mean, to me, that's what this game was all about. On the West Virginia side, I'm a big Garrett Green fan. Guy's tough. He leaves it on the field. I love what he does as a dual threat guy, but I liked what I saw from Nico Marchiol when we saw him a few games ago. And, the issue with Garrett Green is the completion percentage. I mean, he's pretty much in his career between 50 and 60%. And I think coming into the season, we kind of looked at it and we're like, well, maybe it's this or that or the other. And, again, he's right there at that 50 to 60% range. It's just not good enough. You're not completing enough percentage, high enough percentage of your passes to win at this level consistently. And so, as much as I love Garrett Green, I might look at starting Nico Marchiol to see what I have from him because he looked good in the few snaps we saw from him. But this game, Iowa State, West Virginia specifically, came down to basically the fact that West Virginia had only 8 possessions. This is what Iowa State does. They slow the game down. They slow the pace down. West Virginia had 8 total possessions. They had 2 interceptions in back-to-back that were the backbreakers, but just too many empty possessions, missed field goals, turnover on downs. You just can't have that when you only have 8 possessions of the football game because Iowa State's going to make the most of them. This is probably the best Iowa State football team we've seen since Matt Campbell's been there, and I feel like I've said that multiple times, but, I mean, we've just never seen an offense that's as explosive as this one is. And as good as Brock Purdy looks right now, like Rocco Becht is playing better and more consistent than we ever saw Brock Purdy play, which is incredible because he's one of the best NFL quarterbacks right now. So just goes to show you how good Matt Campbell is. And I mean, it's really remarkable. He's consistently redefining Iowa State football history every single year.
It is good that Iowa State is getting the national recognition inside the top 10, and they have played really, really well, as you mentioned. But BYU is 6-0 with wins against the top 25 SMU and also against top 25 Kansas State. They're 13. That's, beggars can't be choosy. Where do you think they should be? Who should be ranked higher, in your opinion, Iowa State or BYU?
Oh, it's a joke. And not even just between Iowa State and BYU, but, I mean, look at Clemson's wins. Are you kidding me? Like, what are we doing here? What is Clemson? Again, it's the same conversation we had last week. Like, is this just recruiting rankings? Yeah. Clemson's wins. BYU has 2 wins against current top 25 teams, SMU and K-State.
Yep. Clemson
has 0 and got smoked by the only team in the top 25 they played. Why are they a top 10 team? It makes no sense to me. What it says, Smokey, is the SEC and the Big Ten are better than the Big 12. That's what the rankings tell me. That one-loss teams, Tennessee, Clemson, and obviously that Clemson is an ACC team, but just look at the way that the layout of the AP top 10 is. BYU and Iowa State are 100% top 10 teams based on the fact that they're undefeated in the Big 12, based on what they've done and their resumes. I mean, it's insane. Ohio State has the same win, has the same best win as Iowa State does. They both beat Iowa. Now, granted, Ohio State did it by many more points than Iowa State did, but look at the wins that Ohio State has opposite that. Western Michigan. So, like, even Ohio State doesn't have as good of a resume as Iowa State does. But again, it's based on recruiting rankings and everything else, and preseason perceptions and expectations. BYU and Iowa State have won 6 consecutive football games. They've beaten good teams to do it. Iowa State has wins over Iowa and West Virginia. And again, West Virginia has 3 losses to 3 teams that are 18-0 right now. So even if they don't want to put Iowa State that high, you should put BYU that high, considering wins over SMU and Kansas State, which are better than a lot of other top 25 teams currently. Tennessee is on that. Again, Tennessee is on that list. What? It's again, it says that the SEC and the Big Ten are better based on the perception of those 2 leagues. And it's a perception issue that the Big 12 has, guys.
What do you think most AP top 25 voters grind about? How high can I put a Big 12 team? Or, my God, Alabama can't be outside the top 10. That's just not allowed.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of it, right? I mean,
I think that's a legitimate conversation that a lot of them have. Well, it's Alabama, or it's
or it's Ohio State, or it's Georgia. 100%. I mean, perception is reality in college athletics. That's why we have to yell and bellyache about the AP Top 25, because it's not just like a meaningless exercise. It is absolutely a perception thing that plays into the teams that get into the playoff. The league, the Big 12 is viewed as a league of parity. And it's like, how is it not viewed as a league that's top heavy? The SEC has 3 teams that are undefeated right now in conference play. So does the Big 12. So I don't really understand what the difference is between these two leagues. At this point, the Big 12 isn't as parity driven as we think it is. It's probably a lot more top heavy than we think it is. It's just not the teams that we expected it to be. Utah's not that good. So all of a sudden the league's not good. Well, what are you talking about? I mean, everybody thinks SMU is good, and BYU beat the tar out of them, held them out of the end zone. It's one of the best offenses in college football, and held them without a touchdown. That Kansas State is one of the most explosive offenses on the ground, and BYU beat them. So yeah, I mean, 100%. Today I called the AP the Associated P brains, because it really is like, just remove your own biases from the situation. Look at these teams, look at their resumes, and just stop plotting down teams down in certain numbers, because, well, Tennessee's in the SEC. Certainly they've got to be a top 15 team. And, and Ole Miss, who has 2 losses now, is somehow still a top 25 team. Michigan is 4-2 and has not looked good at all. How is Michigan in the top 25? Other than the fact that they're Michigan, and if they're not in the top 25, then the rest of the Big Ten wins don't look good by comparison. I mean, it really is a way to prop up the other programs in these conferences, because then you're still beating a top 25 team. Michigan is are you kidding me? There's 15. There's 8 teams in the Big 12 that have better resumes than Michigan to be a top 25 team. Michigan at 24? What?
Yeah, Nebraska's ranked behind Michigan too, and they have a better record than Michigan does. Vanderbilt just beat Alabama, ranked behind Michigan, right?
So and Kentucky.
It's all ridiculous. Part of this, and I hear this a lot, or you see it, and like if you look at a team's schedule, like when you were mentioning Clemson's wins, right? And then I looked at Michigan's wins, or I looked at Tennessee's, so Tennessee beat Oklahoma, who when they played Oklahoma was ranked 15th. And that gets played into a lot of, well, they were ranked 15 when they beat them. Yeah, but this is not the whole thing here. They beat them in week 4 when they hadn't played anybody yet. Doesn't matter what they were when you beat them. It matters what they are as a whole. So again, these rankings are an exercise in a waste of time. Just tell us at the end of the season.
Right. But what sucks is they're not, because they do play into the perceptions. They play. I mean, the committee might say they don't take the AP Top 25 into account, but they absolutely do. And hopefully they'll prove me wrong when they rank these teams, but it very much seems to play into it. And, with BYU, it's as if they just started too low. But how is Texas Tech not ranked? How is Arizona State not ranked? It's like suddenly they beat a bad Utah team when 2 weeks ago Utah was considered a good team. So it's back to what you're talking about, Paul, where we can play these mental gymnastics here all we want and figure out ways to make some of these top 10 or top 15 or top 25 teams look a lot better. I mean, Florida State was once, as you know, Paul, ranked very highly. So is that win for Clemson that much better, since Florida State was at one point ranked in the top 10? It is very much the gymnastics that we do for this meaningless list, but it isn't meaningless. And that's the issue here, is it is a perception issue. And I don't know how it gets fixed. We could say, well, the Big 12 has to have success in the playoff, but that already happened. TCU won the first playoff game for the conference, and they got boat raced by Georgia. So it's almost as if it didn't count. So I'm not even sure what the fix is for the perception, because it just seems like the SEC and the Big Ten just continue to get, from a perception standpoint, higher and higher. And yet the reality of the situation is a lot different than that, especially the SEC. This isn't Nick Saban patrolling the sidelines for Alabama anymore. So what Alabama has been is not what Alabama currently is. And what we've seen them this year is they're not, great win against Georgia. They have not looked good since then. And are they going to slip up again? And will we finally recalibrate based on how many losses they had, or will we hear just how good the SEC is? The SEC will never be talked about as being a league of parity, but that's kind of what it looks like it is right now, where how does Kentucky beat Ole Miss and then lose to Vanderbilt, right? But that's sort of what a league of parity does. But we're going to be led to believe that it's not a league of parity, that it's just that good, as opposed to the Big 12, which is a league of parity, which just means that everybody's mid. It doesn't make any sense.
In terms of eyeballs on the Big 12 and some of that perception, there were definitely a lot of eyes on Boulder on Saturday night. What were your thoughts on what was a very entertaining game and a huge win for K-State, and one where hopefully Colorado can be healthy coming out of this one?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Shedeur Sanders, an absolute stud. The guy just gets beaten to a pulp every week, it seems like, and he just keeps getting up and keeps firing. And then not to mention the fact that they didn't have Travis Hunter or Jimmy Horn, through the majority of this game. You could say, well, look, they've got a bunch of weapons, and they do. I mean, Will Shepard's good, Miller's good. There's no doubt they've got a lot of weapons, but you're going to tell me that taking Travis Hunter out is not going to impact, your play at all? Like, it's crazy. And the fact that they had a comeback, they outscored K-State in the second half 21-3 without Travis Hunter. And while Shedeur Sanders was peeling himself up off the ground, the dude is a maniac. I mean, football at its core, guys, is a sport that tests your will to continue to get up. How much pain are you willing to take on before you're not willing to get up? And Shedeur Sanders is not saying uncle, man. The dude is just always getting up. This was a great football game between two really good teams. You can tell K-State felt like, they were the underdog and that everybody was talking about how good Colorado was. We saw, the Dion dance after Avery Johnson scored. And yeah, I mean, this one came down to the second half where Colorado hits that touchdown to go ahead. And then K-State scored 3 plays later. And then K-State's defense got the stop. That's pretty much it. But this thing came down to the fact that Shedeur Sanders basically had to do it all himself once again. They're so compromised on their offensive line as we continue to see. I mean, I can't remember how many sacks he took in this game, but there's countless other pressures and times that he was hit. And then the running game. I mean, once again, when Colorado is getting its running game going, they're really tough to beat. But unfortunately, in this game, it was just all about Shedeur having to throw the football because they cannot get their running game going. And this was the first game where Colorado gave up a 100-yard rusher. Coming into this game, they had not given up a 100-yard rusher or a 100-yard receiver, and DJ Giddens had that in a half. DJ Giddens is an absolute beast. The dude is a truck. So, I mean, the difference here in this game was the running game for K-State was rolling. DJ Giddens eclipsed 100 yards in the first half of that game. And then, yeah, K-State, when they needed the stop, they got it. They got the stop down the stretch of this game. And, certainly it's hard to overlook the importance and the impact that not having Travis Hunter and Jimmy Horn had on this offense overall.
Who would you rather do the bowl in the ring? Who's on the other side? Taj Brooks, Giddens, or Scattaboo?
Whew. The thing with Giddens is his power too. Like he's not just the power, the speed too.
Yeah.
So I mean, Scattaboo is just like, and we had him on the show last week, and he's awesome. He is just, you're not going to stop him on 4th and 1. Like it's just not going to happen. You can meet him in the hole one-on-one, and it's just not going to happen. So like that's the ultimate power guy. DJ Giddens to me is power and speed, and Brooks is kind of a little bit of both, I would say. So I guess I'd probably go Brooks, even though I'd regret that one too, probably.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it. Paul, anything else for Ari?
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, what do you think Colorado looks like in the future when all these guys are gone? We're going to get a little preview of that with no Hunter and no Horn probably in the next week at least, you would think.
Well, yeah, they're in big trouble at the quarterback position because of what we've just said about Shedeur. I mean, say what you will about him and the arrogance and however he carries himself, whatever. Again, the dude is just taking a beating every week, getting up, still firing. And yeah, the fact that he did that without these guys speaks even higher to him. So, I mean, more than anything, the loss of Shedeur Sanders is going to plague Colorado moving forward because you got to fix a lot. But, Shedeur Sanders fixes a lot himself, right? I mean, Shedeur kind of makes it so your offensive line doesn't totally matter. And that obviously when you get a new quarterback, that's going to matter in a big way. So, yeah, tons of losses with Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders. And I'm not sure which one's the bigger one for Colorado as a program.
Tomorrow, 7 to 10 in the morning, right? Central time?
That's right. Check it out. Make sure to download the TuneIn app if you have not yet already. Make sure to favorite the Big 12 radio. And, yeah, keep it right here with 365 Sports and Big 12 radio on TuneIn because we're bringing you coast to coast across the Big 12, which is one of the best conferences in America right now.
Ari, thank you for your time, buddy. 7 to 10 with James Westling, Big 12 radio. Ari Temkin with us on 365 Sports.